Ward Holder, as some of you know, is a historical and political theologian and professor of theology and politics at St. Anselm College. I was on the board at St. Anselm for a number of years. I learned there that instead of calling it St. A's, they call it St. C's because it's impossible to get an A there. Ward is himself a graduate of Boston College, PhD program. Among his theological efforts, he has co-authored a book entitled The Irony of Barack Obama, Reinhold Niebuhr, and the Problem of Christian Statecraft, published in 2002, and Reinhold Niebuhr in Theory and Practice, Christian Realism and Democracy in America in the 21st Century, published in 2019. He's published in a slew of publications, which I'm not going to go through the list, but just go onto his website. Okay. So welcome, Ward.
Thank you.
I thought we would do this. How long is your
How long do you want it to be?
like 30 minutes?
25 minutes? 25.
25 minutes, and then we can Q&A. And you welcome Q&A.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
I kind of prefer it. This is not... So I'll be giving a form of this study at the Midwest Political Science Association in a few weeks. And if you want anyone to come, you have to have a clickbait title. But the title is also genuine because Reinhold Niebuhr writes a book in 1944 called The Children of Light and Children of Darkness that is, my contention is both understudied and underanalyzed. And so I want to dive into that and talk about it, both Niebuhr and then how Trump fits this and what we should do about it. So the entire title is Trump, Child of Darkness, Niebuhr and the Christian Realist Defense of Democracy, Analytical Possibilities and a Care for Democracy. Reinhold Niebuhr is frequently known, especially among either political theologians or among political scientists, popular for making or creating what's called Christian realism. That's an open and ongoing debate in political theoretical circles, whether there's any significant difference between realism and Christian realism, or whether Christian realism is simply realism with a little bit of Christianity added on top. I make the argument that it's actually meaningful, but I also think that there's a real difference between a political theologian and an ethicist. And most ethicists in America don't see that difference. It's one of the better pictures of Niebuhr, taken in 1951, meaning it's taken about a year and a half before his stroke. He writes he writes a work in 1952 that Andrew Bacevich has called the most important work on American foreign policy ever, and directly after has a stroke, and to my mind never reaches that ability again, although he certainly keeps writing for the rest of his life. The Children of Light and Darkness is published in 1944, obviously during the Second World War. And it's directly after his 2-volume magnum opus, The Nature and Destiny of Man. Yes, I know those are non-inclusive titles, but he was writing in the 40s. We discovered women sometime in the late 60s. Volume 1, Human Nature. Volume 2, Human Destiny. These were the Gifford lectures. At least they began at that. And they began with him giving these lectures and being able to hear bombs. You know, they were given in 1939. The title is almost always unfortunately shortened, except it's a really long title. But so almost everyone calls it Children of Light and Children of Darkness, but it's Children of Light and the Children of Darkness, a vindication of democracy and a critique of its traditional defense. Well, in Children of Darkness, in 1944, that seemed really clear. No one was asking what you meant when you said Children of Darkness in 1944. However, Niebuhr never says, and I've read the book multiple times, he never says this is about National Socialism. In fact, he almost seems to be struggling not to, when that's the obvious boogeyman in not just in the room, but in the world. And so we tend, because we think this is about National Socialism, we tend to miss the nuance of what he's doing. He presents this idea of children of light and children of darkness as two ways of being in the world, which I liken to Augustine's two cities that are defined by their loves. It is not that Augustine wanted to say, okay, I can see you're a member of the city of God, and oh, you're a member of the city of the world. No, he was describing something deeper about the human condition. Niebuhr is too. And I want to argue that this radically different model has not received the analysis either that it deserves or that it needs, especially in the present day. So Niebuhr's two children, and no, I don't mean his actual two children. It's an interesting concept. Children of light and children of darkness is not a kind of Johannine oppositional pair. And that's where Christians tend to go with their thought, because they're so used to the Johannine kind of oppositional pair, light and dark, goodness, evil, the path of life, the path of death. That's very Johannine. 1 John 1:5, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. That's kind of what we tend to think. But what Niebuhr says is, according to Scripture, the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. And what he's talking about is the parable of the dishonest steward in Luke 16:1-9. It's a devilishly, anyone here who preaches either for a living or even part-time, this is brutal. Whenever that comes up in the lectionary, you say, oh, it's time for an Old Testament sermon. Because you just are going to spend all your time kind of trying to explain what the heck was Jesus doing, and you'll never get around to application. The story of the dishonest steward is, there's a dishonest steward. He's not been serving his master well. His master comes and says, give me your books. You're going to be fired. And he says to himself, I love this from the King James Version, I am too weak to dig and too proud to beg. Like, oh, I fit that. And so he goes to all of his master's creditors and arranges for them to have lower bills. You owe my master 100 jars of oil. Let's make it 50. You owe him 30 bushels of wheat. Let's make it 10. And Jesus ends the parable this way. His master commended the dishonest steward, manager in the NRSV, because he had acted shrewdly. The children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, and so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into their eternal homes. Again, I've never preached on it, and I can't imagine that I want to. Children of darkness, for Niebuhr, are evil because they know no law beyond the self. They reject external boundaries. They pursue wealth, sexual gratification, power, revenge, invulnerability, all the things, fill out whatever your list of 7 deadly sins is, or if you've got an updated list. They pursue these without care for external guardrails. Instead of seeing this as simply banal, Niebuhr has argued that this character allows them to be wise. They are wise exactly because they understand the power of self-interest. And this is totally me, this is not Niebuhr. This dynamic has not caught ethicists and political theologians' attention. Far more ethicists especially want to talk about the children of light. Oh, they're flawed. That's something we really want to talk about. We want to talk about the flaws that we don't recognize in ourselves. Oh, that makes sense. We don't really want to talk about actual children of darkness. The virtuous have some conception of a higher law than their own will. And no, Niebuhr's being very broad here. So that could be the natural law. It could be Christian morality. It could be some other religious code. It could be a variety of things. But he has 2 criticisms for the children of light. First, they do not know the power of self-will. They underestimate the peril of anarchy in both the national and international community. And I will make strong reference to that. So hold that in your mind. I'll come back to that in trouble. And the children of light are also foolish because they underestimate the power of self-interest among themselves. That's the one that ethicists always want to talk about. So, Donald Trump. Is he a child of darkness? Well, yeah. He rejects limits. Second, he uses the structures of democracy to hobble his opponents while denying that they apply to him. And finally, he exemplifies the inability of the children of light to understand him. Time and time again, I'll show you what I mean there. So rejection of limits, and I'm trying to do this in 25 minutes, so we're not going to cover all of it. We're not going to scratch the surface. Washington Post notes over 30,000 lies in office. There was a guy in Canada who was just keeping track of the lies, and I think he stopped when he got over 50,000. And some of them can be really small and banal, like I had the most people ever at my inauguration. Who cares? 2, something actually quite material. I never knew that woman. Well, that's a picture of you with her, Mr. President. Who are you going to believe? This photographic evidence or me? Civil cases. He's not only penalized again and again, but the judge put a gag order on him. And he put a gag order on him because he was threatening the judge's clerk. And Trump's response was to put her face, her image on Truth Social, so his followers would know whom to attack. Yes, I'm attributing bad motives. But this is doxing, and he did it. And that's why he was penalized again and again. He came up to St. Anselm the day after he was found liable for the first one, made jokes about it. That's why he was taken in again. Forced the president of St. Anselm the day after to write a letter, an email to the entire campus saying, now it's very important that we have these kind of conversations, but it's also important to know we don't actually support laughing at sexual assault. Good to know. Rejection of checks and balances, immunity defenses, all the time throughout his administration. Criminal cases, getting the Supreme Court to protect him. There's no reason, by the way. There was no reason that the Supreme Court had to take that case. One, two. It's already gone through several other courts. There was no reason to say, well, we need months before we can hear it. That was just to try to give him enough cover that his cases couldn't come to trial prior to November. I already talked about immunity defenses, rejection of emoluments clauses. There are two emoluments clauses that people who work for the government cannot receive things either from either domestically or from international. Trump did that all the time. Trump Hotel. Every Arab lord was saying, gotta send our people to the Trump Hotel because we have to. The Supreme Court said, yeah, we're not going to take that up. January 6th actions, I'm not going to go through them for you. He got the Senate to acquit him twice. He creates a vortex. I want to point out, I know Rudy Giuliani he's like a punchline right now. But remember, this was a federal prosecutor. This was a smart lawyer who ends up screaming lies at election workers, and then when called out on it says, well, yeah, I lied about them, but I shouldn't be punished. He's a prosecutor. He knows damn well better. Lindsey Graham starts out, best thing for the Republican Party would be for him to shut the blank up, and now Lindsey Graham, who used to be a defense hawk, doesn't go to Ukraine, doesn't go to the European Union and talk about defense, instead goes down to Arizona. And the entire Republican Party. And I want to argue that this is proof of Niebuhr's point. The children, I'm not calling the Republican Party evil. I'm saying they don't understand the power of self-will. And we're living in that reality. I'll give you, this is stunning today. Ruth Marcus, wonderful op-ed, liberal Jewish woman writing in the Washington Post. This is not a Trump supporter. writes an op-ed saying, hey, we have to allow Trump not to pay his bond because it's really large, and we shouldn't do that. I'm like, Ruth, we've got poor people all over this country sitting in jail because they can't afford to pay their bond, and Congress doesn't fix that, and now when it affects this person, suddenly it's an issue. And that's my point. Niebuhr diagnosed this to say that man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible, but man's inclination to injustice makes it necessary. For Niebuhr, democracy was a necessity for human flourishing. And I mean that in the sense of government through the consent of the governed. So I'm not saying American democracy. It could be the British parliamentary system, or it could be other forms. But it needs the rulers have to hear the voices of the ruled. Niebuhr recognizes that adherents of this wide variety of worldviews that accept this authenticity of living life under some kind of law are unprepared for the assaults upon their moral and epistemological worlds that the children of darkness bring. Really good example. If you lived and were paying attention through the first Trump presidency, suggesting that there might be a second one, time and time and time again, people would write or say, okay, Has he gone far enough? Republicans, has he gone far enough? People, has he gone far enough? Max Boot, who, a conservative Republican who's kind of shifted because of Trump, in 2018 is writing, okay, now that he's put children in cages, now everybody will... No, they didn't! We don't, because of that power of the darkness, we don't, because we keep assuming that at some point you're going to be like me. You're going to recognize that laws affect you. And Trump doesn't believe that. I would argue that that's true for the Republican mainstream and for white evangelicals, who are not my favorite people. Some of the greatest perils, according to Niebuhr, to democracy, arise from this fanaticism of moral idealists. They're not conscious of the corruption of self-interest in their professed ideals. Democracy requires something more than religious devotion to moral ideals. It requires religious humility. True religion for Niebuhr will always generate humility. True religion. Democracy must always further be on its guard lest its structures be exploited for illiberal or dark purposes. And Trump regularly does that. And the next slide will show you that. But religion, Niebuhr would argue that a lot of what we are calling religion today is not. Quite simply is not true religion. So, white privileged Christianity is not true religion, according to Niebuhr's model. Both true democracy and humility have to have that deep humility. Democracy and the children of light have to be on guard against exploitation of democratic structures and principles by children of darkness. These are examples, but these are also historical examples. Hitler was elected and then made it impossible for other people to be elected. Use of freedom of speech, then prohibiting it to the opponents. Use of free elections, then denying them to opponents. Use of presumption of innocence that is negated for opponents. Look at what we're unwilling to do. We won't apply Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That's the one that says those who have taken an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America and have acted against it can never be elected again. They can't even be on the ballot. There's a way around that, but it requires a supermajority of both houses of Congress, which you couldn't. You can't get a supermajority for saying apple pie is wonderful. Supreme Court just threw that out. A court that claims to be originalist says that there's nothing there. Criminal and civil code. We just don't want to apply it to Trump. The emoluments clauses, which should have been slam dunks throughout his, Jared Kushner gets a $2 billion deal 3 months after Trump leaves office. Was it because he was so great at business? So, for the country to survive, children of light have to become a lot more wise, a lot more shrewd, and also recognize that the use of democratic structures for illiberal purposes is not legitimate. And I'll end there.
I'm going to ask the first question. I'm going to ask a Catholic question of the premier Protestant public intellectual of the 20th century. Okay. In the old Baltimore Catechism, it said a grievous sin, a mortal sin, it had to fulfill three things. It had to be bad, you have to know it's bad, and you freely choose to do it anyways. So what would you ever say? I mean, obviously, you know more Niebuhr than I do. Obviously, he was aware of the power of self-delusion, but also, doesn't he, in the nature of destiny, man, doesn't he say it's possible to actually choose the evil, to know it's evil and choose it? You're not self-deluded. You want to do the evil. You want the evil to result from this.
He does say that. I would not say that Trump fulfills the necessities of the Baltimore Catechism, because you have to take that first layer away. He does not recognize that anything that he does is evil. So whatever I want is good because I want it. And that is until Americans and people of good conscience and religious people understand that, it's very difficult to deal with Trump, because you keep expecting that at some point he or the Senate or Republicans are going to put a bright red line down that says you can't cross this, and those are meaningless to him.
So most of the people I know who defend Trump or think he's not that bad would concede everything you said and just say, you're just mad because he's better at it than everyone else. That we've created a political and economic system where being a narcissistic Machiavellian psychopath is actually a virtue, right? That means how you become successful. It's called the dark triad, right? He's the apotheosis of America. So this idea that somehow, like, did Niebuhr think America was ever governed by the children of light for the children of light? Or hasn't it always been a nation of darkness when you think of the values of the way? I'm thinking mostly about the way we value success. And it doesn't even matter what it's success at. Just so long as you are successful, you're good. And he's great at that, right?
So Niebuhr is a huge fan of both Lincoln and Madison. Mm-hmm. And he recognizes their statesmanship, and he recognizes it in that they recognize the necessity of balancing those lesser angels with others. Both of them, well, especially Madison, because Madison was trained by Witherspoon, and so he gets a Calvinist anthropology, and that causes him to think, okay, you can't actually get people to be good, so you need to put checks and balances where somebody's self-interest is going to check yours, because we can assume that people will continue to be bad. But neither of them are thinking actually about this kind of level of I don't want to call it hubris. It's law. It's not just antinomian. It's anomianism. Yeah. Susanna, did you have it?
No.
Okay.
I think Jason.
Oh, I didn't have a question. Me? Ian did.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if the good is naive in a way. How does Niebuhr's message get communicated? I mean, lived on the ground. Is there a message that can emerge from your analysis that would impact the electorate going forward?
So this is the analysis piece, but I'm working on that. What I want to argue that the first administration of Donald J. Trump should be a wake-up call. I'm not certain that actually works. There's a tremendous amount, and you can actually even see not just in popular things, but there's also now starting to be some scholarly attention to the amnesia that the country is experiencing, of kind of, well, but things were really good with the economy, and you're kind of like, yeah, and COVID hadn't happened yet, and he ran the economy downhill. But that's also like trying to explain your example, trying to explain to certain people that you're not actually a great businessman if your dad gives you a ton of money to begin with, and you
bankrupt yourself 3 times.
Yeah, those things.
It's not a problem of knowledge, right?
So I'm a college professor, and I work in political theory and theology, and so for me the first problem is always: do we understand the problem, and do we know the possible problem at a depth level? And I think through most of the first Trump presidency, we didn't understand. We didn't apply these kind of lessons, and instead kept thinking, well, at some point Mitch McConnell is going to act like the adult in the room, or at some point somebody's going. Congress hates giving up their prerogatives, except they didn't. On the basis of kind of transactional models.
Jason and then Susan.
So obviously the first big uptake here is that the children of light need to get serious, a wake up call about the constitutive elements of the children of darkness. But then the next step is I assume going to be some kind of really clever and robust coercive response to that darkness. Talk to me about the nexus between that coercion and the humility that must accompany democracy and religion.
So Niebuhr always believed in humility, but he also said coercion happens all the time. He's famous for writing that Gandhi's boycotts were every bit as coercive as other forms of coercion. So for Niebuhr, you can argue he's wrong. I don't care. I'm just saying what his theories are. His theory is all governments work through coercion. Those who pretend that they don't fail. So then the question becomes, how does one be humble while also coercive? I think that's not actually as difficult as we want it to be. One can say all people have the right to vote, the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all those things. And I have no right to take that away from them. And that's a kind of stance of humility, while also saying those people who would act to take it away from them must be stopped through appropriate means. John Calvin, another person I work on, would say through the power of the lesser magistrates. But there has to be. The Supreme Court has failed a lot in the last 3 years, and I see I don't see a lot of hope for them right now. And I'm not saying they're morally bad people, but every time they get the chance to say, all right, no, this is a line that one cannot cross and still be in a liberal, small L, democracy, they refuse. They either punt or say, that doesn't apply.
Thank you. This is just fantastic, and I'm so grateful for your talk. I wonder why people don't judge Trump for his behavior, etc. It's as if he's not in himself the person. He's the tool for something. He's the so he doesn't really matter. He's a kind of glass window or mirror or something. But he's the one who will inaugurate. He's sort of this is John the Baptist, where he's the one who's going to bring something else into being, and that's what matters. But I'm also just about Niebuhr. I'm wondering what he would say about the general affect in the United States of the rage and the resentment that exists not only on the right, the Trump supporters, but also on the radical progressive left in our universities. Certainly, we know about that. And then with that, I guess I also, Niebuhr seems to me a little bit, unfortunately, old in this sense. Why does he seem old? Because I guess we're living in a kind of Freudian era, and I don't know how he sees the inner emotional, passionate quality that inspires what he's saying. In other words, to go to a deeper emotional level, or unconscious level, or I don't know what you want to call it. That strikes me as if something is missing with him. There's a
that's fair.
What would he say about
No,
the
it was
left today?
okay. So you put about 16 questions on the table, Suzanne. So first, there's your first issue. Is Trump meaningful, or is he simply the reflection of a larger movement? And I'll just put my card on the table and say he's meaningful. It is Trump. Now, that doesn't mean Trump would work in a different situation, but he, if you want to find the theorist that Trump is really following, it's Carl Schmitt. I'm sure he hasn't read it because Schmitt's hard. But
Steve Bannon has.
Yeah. But so there's that. And then this question of what do we do with the unleashed passions that are tearing us apart all over the place, and we know them. We know them well. I'm not going to recite them. So he would say, in response to the question whether he's too old, and old in the sense of out of date, out of time, not. I think he would say people cheered in Germany as well. So I'm not sure he's. I'm not sure that's dead on, but I know this. So the example that always comes to mind: David French wrote a really good article on the self-understanding of Trump supporters, and that they don't see themselves as angry. They go to the rallies because they're fun, and they're having a great time, and it's almost like an old-time camp meeting, except instead of singing "Give me that old-time religion," you're singing "Lock Her Up" and "Can't Wait to Be Your Retribution," and somehow there's a disconnect between that joy of being part of a group that you see as larger than yourself. And you know, I'm a Christian minister. Of course, I recognize that. Any religious leader is going to say, "Yeah, that's a real thing," and people feel it, and then religious leaders sell it and make the argument, "This is why this is good for you." And they're getting that. But they're not, for whatever reason, and I guess it's this power of unchained desire to overwhelm when someone says something that's really actually quite terrible. I'll go back to St. Anselm. Being found liable for sexual assault one day and joking about it the next, and the room was filled with laughter. Now, I want to be clear, CNN had curated that audience, so to be in that audience, you pretty much had to be, you had to have voted for Trump twice. And somebody did a really good piece on that in the Atlantic. I forget who, but yeah, that was a primed audience. Having said that, I'm sure that if you got those people outside of the group standing there and say, "Well, I want to tell you a funny joke about how my sister got raped." Ugh, what kind of monster are you? So part of this that magnifies what he's doing is that group dynamic, and it's very real, and we haven't gotten our hands on that either.
Matt, you got a question?
Yeah, so this is maybe two kind of questions. I think they're connected. One on the point about Trump being sort of meaningful versus sort of a symptom. I'm wondering if expanding the conversation to a more like global kind of perspective on this question of authoritarianism or like the limits of democracy is kind of helpful, because I think there are figures who predate Trump.
Oh yeah.
That I think have very effectively also done similar things like this. And then there's a whole week of sort of characters following. And I guess I think that points, to me at least, to this idea of like, is democracy a moral reality in itself? Is Niebuhr saying that? Are you saying that? Or is it an amoral event like reality? And that's sort of what empowers Trump, is that he recognizes like the limits and sort of the fact that democracy is what you do with it. And that helps to explain like the way he's sort of using it to undermine it. And I guess too, because you see like a radical critique from the left also of democracy. What has it done for us? And I think that's a very valid sort of critique. Anyways, yeah, I know there's a couple things there.
Yeah, small. Okay, so the first one, yeah, of course, David Gushee has just published Defending Democracy from Its Christian Enemies. And it's a popular book. And I mean, David's a very good scholar, and I know him, and he's super fine, and he can go far deeper, but this is written to get out to a broad audience. And he identifies not only Putin, who clearly predates Trump, but also Orban, other figures. There is, so Gushee's term for this is authoritarian reactionary Christianity. He says he made that up, and I have no reason to disbelieve him. And he thinks that that's a movement that is the problem at the time. I think that your related question of what is democracy, I think that's part of the problem. democracy in Niebuhr's mind is a moral reality that claims to be above morality, that claims not to, and that has been problematic within liberal democracies. How do you maintain that morality without naming it and stating it, and while also then saying the goods of this democracy are for all, whether one is Buddhist or Muslim or Jewish or Christian or atheist or agnostic or any Native American church. I think that's part of that problem. And then I'm forgetting the second question.
Just sort of the critique from the left of democracy.
Yeah.
Sort of what has it done for us, kind of? Like,
I
does
think
that undermine sort of any...
oh my gosh. So I have children, 5. And the youngest is 20, he'll be 28. And he'll say, I'm a Democrat, I'm a socialist. I'm like, you are not! You know, you are not. You don't even kind of know what a socialist is. And he has a degree in politics from George Washington, so, you know. But he's kind of fallen under that particular spell. And I was listening to a segment on NPR, college students at Grand Valley State up in Michigan right before the primary, and they were all like, you know, why should we vote for Biden? I mean, he hasn't gotten rid of all of our debt. I'm like, how much of it do you think Trump's going to get rid of? And I mean, Biden has retired hundreds of billions of dollars of student loan debt. Now, is it as much as he wanted? No. Guess who's at fault? Oh, the Supreme Court. So I mean, yes, the left is taking this on and not being wise in this. You know, they're learning the wrong lesson. The right lesson, I would argue, is that the children of light need to be wise. You know, innocent as doves, wise as serpents. The wrong lesson is, gosh, look at what they do by paying attention to no boundaries. We should do that too. That's an unhelpful model.
So to some degree, building on this, I'm trying to kind of get in the Niebuhrian mind space, and I'm kind of...
It's very difficult.
Yeah. So I guess what the wondering I have is do you think it's an appropriate kind of within either him or your context thing to say that part of what's going on in terms of the challenge of the children of the light is to be able to really make a pragmatic response, like what do we do, requires a recognition of the incompleteness and insufficiency of contemporary democracy. And our inability to do that means we can't appropriately see the potential of the disaster of Trumpism, right? And I think part of my understanding of the Niebuhrian vision there is that's why we need this proximate justice. That like, if we think we're going to get this thing perfect, we'll never do anything. And so we need to do this incremental move.
It's always what is the immediate, proximate, slightly more just thing we can do, not the we will achieve this goal and bring justice in our lifetime. Right. Those are chimerical that actually lead you down a bad path.
And it seems to me that that's partly what's been going on. We're not really willing to make a small incremental changes. That we need to stop this. We need a system that fixes it, and we haven't recognized the ability. We have to say that something's broken to be able to make an intervention.
How many Democrats voted against the package of aid to Israel, aid to Ukraine, aid to Taiwan, because of the things that were in the border bill that was attached. Now, they're, in a certain sense, because of the way the rules of Congress, they're not to blame because the Speaker of the House wouldn't let it come to the floor. But you're right. You know, and is that what Democrats want for a border policy? No. That's the whole point of compromise. That unless you can get a supermajority in both houses of Congress, or one, the upper house and the presidency, you can't pass.
I was attracted by the clickbait title. But you could have added a further subtitle. I'm probably have a different opinion from everybody who's spoken in this room. It's like catnip for progressives. Everything that you said about Trump and against Trump is highly contestable, and the sources you cite are vehement anti-Trumpers. And so the people on the other side that you're speaking against, the children of darkness, don't trust those sources at all. And they've proven themselves in many cases not to tell the truth, if not outright lie. And there are many examples of that. And and you know as well as I do that the people on the other side, you could look at. Speaking about enriching yourself in the presidency. I mean, Donald Trump. I just give this example: the salary he was paid, he gave back to the Treasury. But you look at the three Democratic presidents, starting with Clinton and Obama and Biden. They've all enriched themselves as politicians, and politics isn't such a lucrative business. So you would at least have to ask, where did they get that money, all that money? And the examples are easy to point to. Anyway, I'll just say that much. So if you're trying to understand the other side, and I'm on that other side, you've missed the boat.
So it's an important point. And now what we're talking about is what are facts and what are incontestable facts. Because
take one of the examples you gave.
Sure.
Let's look at it.
So Mitt Romney is a Republican senator. Yes, he did not like Trump, but there's no doubt he was a Republican. His response, his biography says that McConnell came in and said, we are not to be the jury in an impeachment. We are simply to vote the party line because this is a political process. That was in, and Fox News reported this as well. The transcript of the conversation with Zelensky is fairly straightforward. It was an ask for a favor in response for releasing the...
Now, are you talking about Trump or Biden?
I'm talking about Trump.
Okay.
The favor was, will you announce an investigation into my putative opponent, Biden, so I can release the weaponry to you that Congress has already passed. That's simply been reported. It's been reported by One American Network, Fox, because everybody has the transcript of the thing out, the conversation out there. We can argue, well, what did he mean? But we can't argue what the words are, and the president himself said that was a perfect conversation.
Was he talking about Hunter Biden and the money that Hunter Biden was earning while
No.
he was working with Burisma?
He did not.
Anyway, these points are the facts are seen very differently on either side. I'm aware of that. I have people in my family who lean more progressive. I think that's the real difference. If you want to understand the difference, I think that Trump and what he represents and what he's aiming for is a dagger at the heart of progressivism. And the progressives, I think, generally speaking, someone said that the radical left of the progressive movement, but the progressives as a movement have been dragged farther to the left by the radicals on that side.
Well, that would make a lot more sense if the country had elected Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. But they elected Joe Biden, somebody who...
Well, that's the Democratic Party machine that scuttled Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren was a weak candidate, but Bernie Sanders...
But I'm simply talking about who was elected. We also have a problem that a great number of people in this country do not believe that Joe Biden was elected. Now, Donald Trump and his organization have brought a great number of lawsuits to courts, and not one has been found to have merit.
I think we've gone about as far as we can go on that. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you. A lot of people have to go for class, so thank you so much for it.
Thank you for your time.